So you may be thinking, with all the doom and gloom from Matheson and Baade, surely New Orleans did not rebuild the Superdome. Some of you are saying, oh, well, of course they did, because I've seen events there. I've been there since 2005. The Saints won the Super Bowl, right, in 2010? So absolutely, the dome did get rebuilt, and you probably noticed the corporate sponsorship of Mercedes-Benz. So despite the figures given in that article, despite the advice given to city leaders by Matheson and Baade, the people of New Orleans, the city, the state, went on and rebuilt that great space, right, for not only football, but also for other events, other great mega events. One journalist you have in your content folder, a fellow by the name of Martin van der Weyer, who writes for The Spectator in England, in London, visited the Superdome. He was there in New Orleans for a conference, for a convention, an economic convention, to talk about a number of issues, and he had the opportunity to visit the Superdome. And he writes about this. You have this in your content folder. I think it's probably worth reading because it is a lively essay, and it's short. So he says, this is November 17, 2012. Never say this column doesn't offer global perspectives. Okay, sometimes it comes in folksy Yorkshire parables. He's talking about a city in England. But a fortnight ago, 2 weeks ago, I was up close with Branson in Mumbai. He's talking about the fellow who runs Virgin Airlines. And today, I'm speaking to you from the Louisiana Superdome. Yes, I'm standing right on the plastic turf of one of America's most hallowed football fields, watching the New Orleans Saints warm up for a crunch game against the Atlanta Falcons. You might get weightier economic theories on the op-ed page of the FT, that's the Financial Times, but you don't get opening lines like that. So he's very excited. He's an economic reporter reporting on football. The proper name of this glitzy concrete bubble, by the way, is a parable of globalization in itself, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. So a German car manufacturer supporting the mega entertainment venue in New Orleans. But its place in modern American folklore was secured in August 2005 when it served as a refuge for more than 20,000 New Orleanians displaced by floods in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. The suffering of the trapped evacuees, and they were stuck in there, it was a bad thing, under armed guard. They were worried about riots, without adequate food, without water and sanitation. It was bad, or medical help for several days, was so shaming for America that many felt the storm-damaged stadium should be razed to the ground. The Saints, temporarily shifted to Texas, looked set to stay there. Indeed, many commentators, including myself, he says, asked whether it was worth trying to revive the city at large, given that all but its most historic districts were built on sub-sea level reclaimed land, which the levees were clearly unable to defend. Wouldn't it be better for the displaced to make new lives wherever they might find better schools and where they might find better jobs and lower murder rates? Isn't migration a good thing when it leaves embedded deprivation behind? Again, getting back to Matheson and Baade, who said that some of the poor people living in New Orleans are amongst the poorest in the country. Some of the unemployed living in New Orleans suffer the highest unemployment rates in the country. Wouldn't it be better to leave all that behind? Go ahead and restore the heritage sites. We like the French Quarter. We suggested unhelpfully from afar, but get real, abandon the ghettos. Well, that wasn't how the local folks saw it, or most of them. Around 100,000 of the city's 450,000 inhabitants never came back. But those who did, or the ones who never left, have become part of a renaissance which is already wrapped in its own mythology. I've heard Katrina referred to as a baptism. I've heard it referred to as a rebirth. The trombonist Delfeo Marsalis, if you know the Marsalis family, big musicians, talks about the spiritual importance of the music in the city's refusal to be defeated. This is officially America's fastest growing city of its size. We're told it's a hot new hub for digital entrepreneurs, that tourism is booming like never before, that underperforming schools have been transformed, that corrupt local government is a thing of the past, that the city's leading university, Tulane, is overwhelmed with undergraduate applications from all over the states. And the Saints, once such consistent losers, they were known as the Aints, won the 2010 Super Bowl to become the totem of reborn self-confidence. As for the 2008 financial cataclysm, it was a mere tremor compared to what the hurricane had already wrought. Quoting, "We did not have a subprime crisis here in Louisiana because we didn't have any houses left to mortgage in New Orleans. We're ahead of the game now because we've been recovering since 2005. It's all about the future. No one's talking about prosecutions and public inquiries to expunge the past, fueled by a mix of federal spending, large and small-scale capitalism, charity, and a change of mayor. All this offers a fascinating example of creative destruction. The concept adapted from Marx by Schumpeter that I happen to be here to discuss at his conference. Simplifying freely, it says, this theory says of creative destruction, that from the annihilation of a failing economic order, something more positive eventually emerges. That is what Katrina, so much more fearsome than last week's superstorm Sandy, seems to have brought about here. Again, he's writing in 2012. The transformation is not without its dark edges. The influx of YURPS, Y-U-R-P-S, young urban rebuilding professionals, and self-styled social entrepreneurs has not been universally welcomed. Brad Pitt's designer architect Make It Right Homes project is in the worst afflicted lower Ninth Ward. It looks really, from a distance, he says, it looks really bright and shiny. He's not really sure how it's going to work out. My conference group can only view it from a distance because buses, like ours, have been banned from the lower Ninth Ward. Residents are tired of being gaped at or gawped at by disaster tourists, he says. In adjacent wards, many houses remain broken and untouched, impossible to tell whether they were still lived in. This is what Matheson and Baade were concerned about. Since they emerged from the receding waters displaying strange marks left by army units, checking for survivors, checking for corpses. The Marsalis family name attaches to a new musicians' village in the Ninth Ward, but elsewhere only the little white churches speak of any kind of community life. Poor black families are still dirt poor, still badly housed, still at the bottom of America's ladder of life chances, still at high risk of casual murder in their own neighborhoods. A city that cannot account for 100,000 of its citizens 7 years after they fled cannot be complacent about renewed prosperity. His final couple paragraphs talk about an irrational spirit. And it does seem, the economist Matheson and Baade, this is just irrational. Why are we doing this? But despite those caveats, what's happened here is an illustration of the human spirit at its irrational best. Regeneration is far from complete and far from all-inclusive, but it has moved forward at a pace which no pundit would have dared to predict in late 2005. We are repeatedly told that jazz, football, and food, the cuisine is terrific, he says, unlike anywhere else in America. Not that there isn't good cuisine elsewhere. It's unusual. It's unique in New Orleans. And so it's jazz, football, and food that are what made residents love this city so much that they were never going to give it up, never give up on their city. Jazz, football, and food. The things that make people happy in these seemingly non-essential ways are what also make them optimistic and determined. If only British provincial cities, not hurricane hit, but drizzled on by dismal economics these past 5 years, could harness that kind of energy. If only a hurricane could sweep the city of London and allow something better to emerge, though that's a whole column for another week. Meanwhile, I urge you to visit and see what I'm talking about. Against the odds, the Saints beat the Falcons 31-27. So in comparison to Matheson and Baade, this essay, it's a short one, sorry to read the whole thing, has a much more positive take on the role of this mega structure, the Superdome in New Orleans. It does indeed give people hope and confidence that we can rebuild the city. It gives people something to hang on to in their culture, in their communities. But even as this essayist says, there are still lots of places in New Orleans that are not rebuilt after the flood. And it would be interesting to see 10 years out, which will be in 2015, that's just around the corner, what kind of progress is made in general in housing and in general in the population. And it would be nice to know, did the city get a better deal with the New Orleans Saints owner? And is the city actually enjoying more revenues from its relationship with Mercedes-Benz and the Saints?